Welcome back everybody, Russell with Walker Custom Garage. Really excited to do this video for you today. I've got two pieces of really exciting news that I want to share with you. Just recently got the transmission back, and today we're going to go ahead and load up the engine, take it to the machine shop. Alright, just a couple things to update before we get started on this. Number one, sold bone shaker. That was a big deal. They gave me some income so that we can go ahead and finish this thing, plus a little bit extra to do something else. And number two, in February of 2025, here in Tulsa, the Thunderbird show, I've made the goal, I've made the commitment to try to get that into the show. So that means that I have to have this thing done and as show quality as I possibly can. Now that's going to be a major feat, but I have the funds, I have the time, I have the energy and the motivation to get it done. So we're going to work on that as hard as we can and try to get it done by February. With everything moved out, we've got the garage cleaned up. So here it is, the floor's been etched and everything. It's not perfect, but I've been working on etching this thing all morning, so it's as good as it's going to get. So I'm getting ready to paint it. Here's the color that I'm going with. It's sort of just a very light gloss gray, and then there's terrazzo flakes that I can add to that. Here it is all finished. It turned out pretty good, looks really good. It's a little thin over here because it started to run out, but I just made up for that with some extra terrazzo flakes, but it came out pretty good. It's a lot thicker, I think, in some of the more high traffic areas back there, except for up here. That's going to take 2 or 3 days to cure. Alright, well, after almost 3 days of allowing this to dry and cure, here it is. This is a finished product. Looks pretty nice. Not that it was necessary, but it's just something I've wanted to do for a while. I figured I'd take the opportunity. So I'm going to go ahead and get everything moved back in here and organized and staged. Then we can get to work again. Well, I've got some good news. That is that the engine came back for the Thunderbird finally. Was only in there for 2 months, and I ended up calling to just check on the status, and they were like, yeah, it's been done for about a month now. Like, well, nobody called me. So that's the second time now that I've used that place where they haven't called me. The stuff's just been sitting there. So anyway, engine's done, crank's been turned, I've had it balanced, I've had it honed. We could take a look real quick. We'll get deeper into this. You can see that there's a bit of ring ridge in here on the other side as well, but for the most part, I mean, it looks bad, but I can't feel anything. So I think it's all right. The machine shop said it was fine, so we'll just go with what they said, but yeah, I don't feel anything in this stuff. So we should be okay. We'll take a look at it once we get it on the engine stand. I've got the motor all cleaned up and everything. It's about as good as it's going to get. Cleaned it up pretty well. You can see the cylinders. There's like a ring ridge, but I can't feel it. I can't feel it at all. I definitely can't catch it with my fingernail. So there it is, all cleaned up. I'm gonna go ahead and get it all taped up and everything, and get it ready for some primer and some paint. Okay, here it is all taped up, ready for paint. So we'll get some primer on there real quick and let that dry. Probably put, I don't know, 2 or 3 coats primer on there, and then go ahead and hit it with glue. Got the pistons, the rods, and the pins for the Thunderbird. Because the machine shop was awesome enough not to give me any information, I'm going to go ahead and take the time to go through all this stuff and weigh it. I've already got the pins weighed out. I've got the connecting rods weighed out. I've got to clean up the pistons. They're pretty dirty. It looks like they only did one, which is not cool. I'm going to go through here and measure everything, see what the weight is, so that we can get everything as balanced as possible when we put this back together. Like I said, I need to clean the pistons up real good. I also need to take the piston rings out, get those cleaned up really good. Scrub some of the carbon deposits off at the top, and then go ahead and measure these. Once I get all the totals for everything, I'll be able to add everything up, try to get it as close. I can even do some shaving on the connecting rods if I need to, even on the pistons. I'm not going to mess with the pins, those are the way they are. but we should be able to compensate between the pistons and the connecting rods fairly well. And right off the bat, I have a problem with one piston in general. If you've watched any of the past video, you would know that this would be the driver's side front, where the valve, I think it was the intake valve, broke off and bounced around inside the cylinder wall. The cylinder walls look pretty good, but this is the messed up piston. That top's not that big of a deal, but you can see the rings are stuck in there. There's no gap whatsoever. That top one is not bad, but I can't even get in there to get the rings out. I mean, they're glued in pretty good, so I'm gonna have to figure out a way. I've already broken a hook off in one of these. I think it was the bottom one, but yeah, I'm having a hard time getting those out, and I'll have to grind on the top a little bit, try to get it as flat as possible. So I'm fighting with this one right now, trying to get these rings off. Well, I'm still working on this piston, but the good news is I've just got this lightly clamped in here. It's not, there's really no pressure on it, but I've been able to get a little bit of this top ring out. There's about half of it out, but it's so brittle that I can only go about an inch or two, and then it just starts breaking apart. I don't know if there maybe water got in there, got behind the rings, and it's just rusted. But this is a slow process. I've been on this for about 2 hours, and I finally just got this ring broke apart, and it's just coming apart piece by piece. So still working on it, and then I got the second one to do, but we'll get there. All right, well, finally I got that second ring out. You can see it's not in there anymore. Here's the remnants of it. I think you'll be able to kind of tell just kind of crud was back here, just rust and gunk and everything else, that water getting in the engine or whatever it was, and getting behind those piston rings and sealing them shut. So anyway, that was not fun, but I got it. But I'll be able to get those pins and the rods connected with the pistons and move on. All right, I got everything cleaned up, everything's done, everything's ready to assemble. I've got all my calculations figured out after getting the number 5 piston taken care of. So as you can see, we come out, everything across the board, all the combinations come out about 1.5 grams from the heaviest to the lightest. So that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I've got all the combinations ready to go. This is not a race motor by any stretch of the imagination, so this is going to be good. I'll go ahead and get everything cleaned up and ready to assemble. We'll get some lubricant on here, then we'll assemble the rods to the pistons. I've got everything cleaned up, ready to go. I got the cranks cleaned and ready to go in. I've got to install my main bearings and all that. So I got to digging around, and I found the main seal in there, so we're good to go. This is a little bit different one. This doesn't have the pins, but Mr. Gasket says that we don't need them. So I'm going to go ahead and get the main bearings installed. Then we're going to use the plastic gauge to check and make sure everything is good to go. And then we'll get everything cleaned up again and actually install the crankshaft to the block. We've checked our clearances and everything. Everything looks good. It's pretty tight, but I guess that'll ensure really good oil pressure. So I've got the seal in there. So we'll go ahead and lube this up and throw the crankshaft in, get the main caps on, and bolt it all down. Now that we got all the main caps in, I'm going to go ahead and tighten this stuff down just by hand. And then we'll go ahead and torque everything except for the thrust bearing. Just keep it finger tight. The torque specs for a 352, kind of the same as a 360, 390. They're calling for anywhere from 95 to 105 foot-pounds, so we're just going to split the difference and go 100 foot-pounds and call it good. Spins pretty free. All right, well, after fighting with this thing for the past 2 hours or so, trying to figure out what was wrong and everything, I had a little bit of trouble with the thrust bearing here. It was really tight, so I ended up doing a little bit of wizardry on it, and came out just right. Everything spins pretty free. It's really easy, so that came out good. I'm happy with that. But I tell you what, this thing has fought me the entire way. I mean, I've had problems with the ring, number 5 piston rings. Had problem with the number 2 rod fitting to the wrist pin, and now the crank bearing. So I hope it goes smooth from this point forward, but you know, it is what it is. It's an engine. This is actually my first time putting one together, so this is a learning curve for sure, but we're getting there slowly but surely. It's time to put the bearings in the rods, then we can start putting the pistons in the block. Okay, so I'm set up with my pistons and the rods, got everything connected. I've got the piston rings clocked, everything's right the way it should be. I've got all my bearings in. I'm ready to drop this stuff into the motor, so let's get after it. All right, there it is, lower rotating assembly, all the pistons, connecting rods, crankshaft in. Still got a couple things I need to do to seal up the bottom end. I've got over there somewhere, I've got the oil pump I need to get cleaned up, make sure it works right so that I can get it installed. And then the oil pan, I need to get that cleaned up and painted and ready to go, and then we can go ahead and seal the bottom end up and start working on the top. Here is the original oil pump. I need to go ahead and, you can see how greasy it is and everything. I need to go ahead and take it apart, check the inside, make sure everything looks good, go ahead and get it cleaned up and put it back together. I have a method that I want to try to go ahead and see how this thing flows, if it works properly or not. If it doesn't, I'll have to order another one, but I think this is worth a try. And then obviously the oil pan here needs to be cleaned up and painted so that we can get that put on. Well, this is the end result after using the wire wheel. So it came out pretty good. There's a couple spots that, you know, I'm not going to be able to get out very well. So it'd be better off sandblasted, but I just don't have that option right now. There are a couple spots that I need to address. You can see right there, there's some pinholes. Yeah, we're gonna have to address those. I'm gonna go ahead and get this cleaned up and get the inside cleaned up pretty good too, and then we'll figure out a way to fix those pinholes. So I'm here with the oil pan trying to fix these pinholes. I've decided to go ahead and weld them. I'm a welder by trade, so I think I can get this to work. There it goes. I'm just kidding, guys. This is just JB Weld. I'm not gonna weld this thing. But that should do. That should work pretty good. We'll go ahead and give it some time to set up and go ahead and grind it down. Should be just fine. Got the oil pan fixed and primered. So while that's drying, I'm gonna go ahead and get this cleaned up. I've got a couple brushes that I'll try to get in there with. I really don't want to take this thing apart. I might have to, just to be able to get into the pump itself. But we'll just see what happens. I'm gonna get in there and clean it up the best that I can. If I have to take it apart, great. But I really don't want to have to order another one, especially if this is gonna work just fine. But I'll get it cleaned up, and then we're gonna rig something up to where we can actually test it and see how it flows. And if it flows good, then, you know, obviously I'm not gonna have to worry about buying another one, but it's worth a shot, it's worth a test, and we'll see what happens. All right, here's the setup that I've come up with. I've got enough in there to go ahead and cover the screen for this thing, the pickup screen for this thing. And I'm just gonna, I got this paper rigged up here so when we get the pump flowing, it doesn't flow straight up, and it kind of diverts it back down into the bucket or the tub. So we're just gonna see if this works. I have no idea if it's gonna work or not, but we'll give it a shot and we'll see what happens here. It should work. Oh yeah. Perfect. So that worked pretty well. Pretty happy with that. That means the pump works just fine. And that's going to save me about, I don't know, 50, 60, 80 bucks maybe. But I think that was well worth it. Now we can go ahead and get this thing installed, finish painting the pan, and then get that installed as well. With the oil pump all cleaned up and tested, we're ready to go ahead and put that on. So I've got the new gasket there. Go ahead and bolt this up. All right, these bolts call for 15 foot-pounds, but I can't get the wrench, the torque wrench on this other side, so we're just gonna have to feel it. Should be good. Now that I got that oil pump installed, I'm going to go ahead and put some RTV down on the block here for the oil pan gasket. And that's probably don't need it, but that's just for me and my peace of mind, because I do not want any leaks, especially oil leaks. And you can see I've already got the gasket on the oil pan, got RTV on there as well. And I don't really care for these cork gaskets very much. I would much rather have like a rubber one, but this is what the gasket kit came with, so we're going to use it and it's going to work for what we need it for. ready to install this camshaft. But before I do that, I wanted to ask you guys a question. I don't know anything about this camshaft stuff. The one that I ordered is a direct replacement for the original. I got it off of eBay and there wasn't much information. I just recently went back and I looked to see if there was any information. I couldn't really find anything. I found the part number, so if there's any internet sleuths out there that can maybe do a better job than me, I couldn't find much of anything. The eBay ad said that it was an Angell, and the number is HL1900S. Now, I did a little bit of research and found that it may be a melling camshaft with the number SYB8. Obviously, measuring with the calipers came out a little bit bigger, especially on the exhaust side, than the original camshaft. So if there's anybody out there who knows how to look this stuff up better than I do, please, down in the comments, let me know just exactly what I've got here. That way I have a better understanding of what to expect from this camshaft. Alright, well, I got the timing chain on. All the timing marks are lined up just fine. Everything worked just fine. Got the fuel pump eccentric on there. We got the cam button on there. Got the cam bolt tightened down to 40 foot-pounds. And as you can see, this is just the original timing chain and everything. There's not a lot of slop in it. It's actually pretty tight. So we're going to go ahead and use that. That worked out pretty good. Now can put the front cover on. I got the timing cover on, got the pulleys, both the power steering pump pulley and the front pulley. I've also got the oil filter assembly cleaned up and painted. This is just kind of on here loose. It looks like it's in good shape, so we can probably reuse it, but I need to see how much those are. Might just replace it with the new one. Yeah, everything's good. I think what I've decided to do, I don't want to use the mechanical fuel pump, so I think I'm going to make a block off plate for this, and then I can just run a electric pump. I think that'll be a lot better. It'll keep things a lot cleaner, and it'll be a little bit less drag on the motor. So I think I'm going to go that way. I'm going to make a block off plate. And I was ready to throw these heads on there. I got those broke out. But there's one small problem. Right here, I'm missing a dowel, an alignment dowel. So I need to get one of those on order. I was hoping that it was stuck in the head or something, but then I remembered that they resurfaced the head, so it's definitely wasn't in there. I want to wait to put the water pump on until after I get the heads and the intake on, because there's a hose that connects between the intake and the water pump, and I just want to make sure to get that on there. Also need to get the valley pan cleaned up. That's somewhere around here. I don't know. It's on that shelf full of stuff, but things are coming along. I just kind of had a stopping point because of this dowel. Well, I've got some good news. The dowel pin for the heads came in. The strange news is that I couldn't find just one, not even a set of 4. Instead, I found 25. So I guess that means I've got some more FE motors in the future. Alright, go ahead and get this installed here. I can get those heads on finally. Simple as that. Alright, let's get these head gaskets on. So the front goes to the front. Don't want to put them on wrong. Front goes to the front. I am ready to tighten these heads down finally. Got to do them in sequence. 90 foot-pounds. So that's what we're going to go with. 90 foot-pounds in 3 different sequences. I'm going to start with 20 foot-pounds first and go all the way around from the center out. Kind of running away on me. All right, heads are bolted on. Looks good. All right, before I get too far into this thing, next is going to be the valley pan, the lifters, and then the intake manifold. But that thing weighs like 80 pounds. So I'm a little sketchy on how to move this with all that weight on there and, nothing really to grab onto. So I want to go ahead and try to move this onto an engine test stand before I put the intake on. So I need to look at getting the motor mount bolted up here so I can take measurements. Now you can see I've got this opened up, and man, we still got a lot of work to do inside here. But I have with me the brand new motor mounts, and I was checking out the old motor mounts that I have, and this bolt, the actual bolt that holds the mount in, is a little bit bigger than the original. So I just want to reach in here real quick and check and make sure that it fits, so I don't have to do any modifications or get a surprise before. Okay, all right, that fits pretty good. Just gonna have to find the nut to go along with that, but that makes me feel a little bit better. Now also, while I'm in here, you can see that I got a brand new radiator. This is from Champion Cooling Systems. It's the same company that I got the radiator for Bone Shaker. You can order these custom, but they also come prefabricated for certain models, and they happen to have one for a 1959 Thunderbird, so I went ahead and picked one up. This is a 3-core aluminum radiator. It was around the same price as a brand new original replacement, so I just went ahead and went this way. So I want to make sure that this fits inside here before I get too far and while I have this opened up. Alright, so I'm going to try to lower this in here without scratching up this beautiful mirror finish. Still got that condenser in here, and it's going to be a bit of an issue, I think. No? Well, it lines up top up here pretty good. It fits all along down the side and everything, just like it should, I think. So that is good news. That makes me feel a lot better. We can go ahead and continue on. I went ahead and bought an engine cradle. It turns out that it's for a small block Chevy, but I think with a little bit of modification I can actually get this to work. I'm going to try to modify this and get it to where I can get these motor mounts to fit on a Chevy engine cradle. That way we can go ahead and test the engine before we actually drop it into the car. Alright, got the motor mounts bolted on, torqued down, 45 foot-pounds, but I wanted to show you this. This is a little interesting to me anyway. It doesn't make much sense why you have a motor mount sitting over your freeze plug. I'm not sure what good that freeze plug is going to do if things go bad. I mean, you got two other ones here that should pop out, but you know, this just doesn't make any sense to me. But I guess that's good old Ford engineering. So I'm on the home stretch. I'm ready to go ahead and take the engine off of the engine stand, take the transmission and connect it without putting the torque converter and putting it all together. I still need to paint the transmission, but I need the bell housing so that I can connect the starter and actually start the motor, turn the motor over. So that's what I'm going to work on now. Hopefully it works out the way that I expect it to. Alright, so here it is. It kind of worked out pretty good. As you can see, the engine cradle handled the engine just fine. It's kind of balanced on there. You know, I had to cut this back off just in order to get the transmission on there. It was just in the way, so especially on the opposite side where the starter goes. But there it is. So now I'm able to get the exhaust manifolds on. So I'll do that next. And also get the water pump, and then the intake, valley pan, the lifters, you know, all the stuff. We can go ahead and get it completed. I've got the alternator on the way. So that's going to be about a week or so. Moving right along. Transmission's torqued down. I do have the flex plate in there so that I can start this thing. The torque converter is not connected right now. I'll go ahead and take this apart and, you know, dress up the transmission, but I'm not interested really in hooking it up and running through the gears and all that stuff. That's just not necessary. Just need to break in the engine, and I think this is a winning combination. I got the exhaust manifolds, and I couldn't locate the flanges that came off of these. I don't even know if I saved them or not. So what I did is I went ahead and made some templates that match pretty good. Took them to work, cut out some flanges. So these line up pretty good. As you can see, I still gotta drill these holes out, make sure they match up real good. And then I've got to cut a piece of this 2-inch pipe, go ahead and weld on here to have something to connect to for the mufflers and run all the pipes and everything. So I got to get that done. Still need to put the water pump on. Got my lifters soaking in oil. I went ahead and picked up some of the spark plugs and just a couple things. All right, I managed to get the exhaust manifolds on. That was pretty simple. Also got the lifters in here, as you could probably see, plenty of oil. And now it's time to put in the valley pan. Now this is something that we don't want to forget, right, Angel? No, I'm just making fun. If you like my content, you should definitely go check out Dylan over at Angell's Garage. He puts out some amazing content. He's currently working on a 1963 and 1964 Thunderbird, and he does an immaculate job, not only in his craftsmanship and his work, but also in describing how he does all this stuff and even his mistakes. That's what I like about his content the most. So if you like what I'm doing, definitely go check out Angell's Garage, and I'll leave a link in the description below. All right, with the valley pan in, I've got the intake gaskets on the heads. I've got the proper areas sealed off with sealant. I've got the China walls coated with sealant. I'm not going to use the cork gaskets that came with the gasket set. I'm just going to use the sealer. So now is the trick. I need to get this 80-pound intake manifold on here as easily as possible. There it goes. Now there's a dowel on the front of this block that lines up this intake manifold. So that helped out quite a bit. And get the bolts in here and get it bolted down. We're at 35 foot-pounds from the center out. All right, getting closer every day. So now that I have the intake on, I'm ready to go ahead and put on the water pump. But first thing I wanted to show you is that this fitting right here, I couldn't get that out. I went to replace it, couldn't get it out, couldn't get it to turn, so I don't know if it's pressed in or what. This also holds the temperature sensor. And one of the problems that I had right away was that this tube is about 1 inch in diameter. So I didn't know what to do because the water pump fitting is 5/8. Somebody had suggested that you take 3/4 inch, wrap it around, and then just put a 5/8 piece on the inside of it. So that's what I did there. This should work pretty good. I should just be able to press that right in and then bolt it up. Now that we've got the water pump on, I'm gonna get this pulley on and the fan. This should be it. That is tight back there, jeez. Anyway, I am not planning on putting a fan on here, a fan blade. I did not keep the original one. It looked really out of whack. So instead, what I'm going to do is an electric fan on the brand new radiator. One of the most important things that I have to do is to get these rocker shafts cleaned up. As you can see, they're pretty dirty. I was working on this one just to try to get it cleaned up, see how feasible it is to clean them up. Just using some brake cleaner, and it looks like it's going to come up pretty good. After looking at these, I mean, they look pretty bad, but everything rotates pretty good, nothing's seized up, so I think it'll be a good idea to go ahead and recondition these. So I'm going to commit to taking these apart. It's just a series of pins and washers and springs and whatnot, so I'll get these taken apart, keep them in nice order, and then get them cleaned up one by one. Well, here is the finished product after getting it reworked. You can see just how different that is. So it took me about an hour, hour and a half to get it to this shape, and you can see just how mucked up this stuff is. I mean, it moves, but it catches, but this stuff is just pretty much free floating. So that was definitely worth the time and effort that it took to get that done. It was just really tedious. I'm finally at the point where I'm ready to get the rocker arms, the rocker shaft on here. First I got to get these push rods in, but that's no big deal. So one thing that I do need to show you is that this one right here, and I believe it's this one right here on that side. This one right here has the oil hole that pushes the oil from the pump up into the rocker shaft and oils the whole rocker assembly. So we want to make sure to put the right bolt in that hole. Now on these rocker shafts, there's a bolt that is a little bit longer than the rest of them. And doing some measuring with some calipers, this hole is about, from the top of this base, is about 1.25 inches till it bottoms out. And the rest of these holes are just under 1 inch. So that's where that long bolt is going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and get these push rods in here first, and then we'll bolt up this rocker shaft. Also need to get these little baffles put in. The manual calls for 45 foot-pounds, but we need to go from one end to the other. I'll just get them snug, and then we'll go 20 foot-pounds, and then we'll go ahead and finish it off at 45. These still rotate, so it must be good. I'll go ahead and get the other side done. Then I'll rotate the engine about 45 degrees. I'll come back and check, make sure that everything's where it should be. I've got the rocker shafts all bolted down, torqued down, but you can see just how tight this is, how close it is right up against that intake manifold. Some of these are so close. Like, look at this. Look how close that is. I don't know if you can see that, but that is super close. Yep. How close that is. But I guess Ford knows what to do. I mean, there's enough space in there. There's about a 1/16 inch in there. The other side's a little bit better. But I guess that's the way it was designed, so we're going to roll with it. So I've run into a bit of a problem. I've got the distributor in. It's not completely seated yet, but obviously it's an HEI. And I wanted to go this route because, first of all, it's a lot easier to deal with. It's one single wire that runs the power to the distributor. You don't have to mess with the points and all that stuff. But on top of that, this is the original distributor, and it's seen better days, that's for sure. The last thing that I want to do is have to deal with cleaning this thing up and then, you know, getting it in there and having to mess with the points and the condenser and all that stuff. I don't even want to deal with that. It's only single point anyway, so I don't really want to mess with that. So I went with the HEI. However, the problem arises with the expansion tank. Now when I set the expansion tank on here, you can see that there's just no room. Like, the expansion tank will bolt up just fine, and I can still move the distributor a little bit, but as you can see, the advance is, I'd say that the expansion tank is in the way of the advance, and then you have the overflow, where the overflow hose would attach, is in the way for the distributor. I'm not going to be able to play with the timing as much as I would like to. So I have a bit of a problem there. Now what I can do, and this is what I'm thinking about doing, is making a flange to match the expansion tank and the intake, you know, 1/4 inch, 3/8, something like that. And that should push it out far enough to where I'll have a little bit of play with the distributor. The overflow won't hit. I'll be able to put a hose in there just fine, and everything should be good that way. So that's what I'm thinking about doing. I really don't want to put the original distributor in there. I've already got this thing. This was pretty expensive, so I think that's what I'm going to do. Now, I know a lot of you are not going to agree with the HEI and some of the upgrades, but I think this is just the easier way to go. Technically, this makes it not entirely original, but you know, there's going to be a couple upgrades. I'm going to do an electric fuel pump, so I've got the block off on there already. Obviously the HEI distributor. I have the original carburetor, but it's a disaster. There's literally a rat nest in it, so I don't want to clean that up. I don't know anything about carburetors, so I went ahead and got an Edelbrock AVS2 that fits on there just fine. But there's a couple issues with that as well. We'll get to that in a little bit. I also have an alternator coming. It's not going to be the original generator that'll connect into these brackets, but instead it is a legitimate single wire alternator. That was cheaper than the generator, so that's the way that I went. And you know, I'll fix the brackets however I need to make that work, get it lined up and everything. But there's going to be a couple upgrades on here. I think that's going to work out best in the long run. So this is about a 1/2 inch spacer. I had to locate some bolts, longer bolts, in order to get in there, but I did that. So I'm going to go ahead and get this expansion tank and everything put together. We'll glue it together with some RTV, get the gaskets on there and everything, and bolt her up, and that'll pretty much do it for the engine. I've also got the, this is the new carburetor, Edelbrock AVS2, so that's brand new. I've got some issues with that. I do need to get a carb spacer for it, but we'll get there. It's not bolted down yet. We'll get there. There's a lot of things that's not bolted down on here yet, so that's one thing that I'm definitely going to have to do, is go back through this thing and make sure everything's tightened down the way it needs to be before we actually try to fire it up. Well, there we go. Got the expansion tank on, and you can see even with that spacer in there, it's still pretty tight. I'm still limited with my adjustment here, so I'm going to have to really keep a close eye on that whenever I stab that distributor for the final time and get it fired up. But we'll make do. Still got to go down a little bit. You know, I've got to actually seat this thing, so I might have a little bit more of adjustment, but still the plug wires and everything are, all this is kind of interfering. And then on top of that, you know, if there's going to be a leak, it's going to be in this area here. You know, some of the hardest parts to get to, I have to take all that stuff apart and redo it. So hopefully with a little bit of luck, everything will go off without a hitch. I've got to block this tube off here. I think that's for the heater. I've got a couple other areas blocked off. There's one for the heater as well, that's blocked off. I've got a vacuum port here that I think went to the distributor, but I'll have to block that off as well, because we'll just use the vacuum off of the carburetor. Let's see. Oh, I've got to get my starter in, but I'll have to cut this bracket off in order to get it in. It's pretty big. So I got to get that cleaned up and make sure it works before I try to put it in there. Still have to do the flanges for my exhaust. That's no big deal. I have my mufflers are coming in. They're just standard glass packs, you know, something to use temporarily just to test the engine. Yeah, I got a new oil sending unit, brand new one that I'll replace this with, but in the meantime, you know, I'll have to come up with quite a few things. I'll have to figure out where to put my radiator, how to mount it so that we can test this thing. Have to run all the gauges, tachometer, water gauge, oil pressure gauge, you know, just certain things just to make sure that we can get this thing broke in properly. So I've still got some things that I need to do. Like I said, I need a carb spacer to get this and bolt it down. Then I'll have to run all the lines and everything, vacuum lines and whatnot. I do have this one area. This is really the only thing that concerns me. I guess this is the crankcase ventilation. There should be a tube back here. I don't know where that's supposed to go, but I'm probably going to need to block that off, or you know, figure out a way to run a hose or something to the carburetor something like that. I'm not sure, but we'll get to all that here after a little bit. Shouldn't be too long. I think most everything is supposed to be here by this weekend, so I could start getting everything hooked up and ready to fire this thing off once and for all. But I'm pretty happy with how it's come out so far, so I think it looks great. I like the color combination of everything, so you guys let me know. What do you think? Does it look good? I love it. So I think that's it for this one. I really appreciate you guys sticking around for this. I'm really excited to get this thing fired up, break it in, see how it runs. I'm really interested to see how that cam acts. So we'll get there here hopefully within a week or so. You know, it'll be a little bit longer for you guys because I'll have to edit the video, but I'm pretty excited. I'm really happy with how this thing came out so far. I've had a couple obstacles that I've had to overcome, but no big deal. So anyway, there it is, 352 for the Thunderbird. So anyway, we're gonna leave it there. I want to thank you guys for sticking around and watching the video. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the support and everything. There's plenty more to come, I assure you. By the time you're watching this, I'm well ahead of where you think I'm at. So got a lot to come. Still shooting for that February end date in order to get into the Daryl Starbird show. So hopefully we'll make it. If not, we'll give her hell. So thanks again for following along, and we'll see you guys in the next one.